Hello, squad. I just wanted to offer some quick thoughts on the Ethnostate debate that AndyWarski had.
Here we go. Let's keep going. You sure? Yeah. Broken eyes, parade, and I put my heart out on display. There's no masquerade.
So they basically started off from the very start, sort of this overall theme was like defining whiteness or what it means to be white. And I think the sort of details got a little muddied in that what Sargon was trying to say was if you put a lot of power in race, what you're going to get is infighting and purity spiral. Not so much that whiteness didn't exist, as sort of Spencer and Millennial Woes were trying to say that Sargon was. Basically, this infighting is what happens when there's a lot of power at the top of any society. Not even just the AltRight ethnostate, but just any society. For instance, like Ottoman sultans would kill their brothers and relatives by rolling them up in blankets because there was a lot of power at stake. The same with kings in Europe. They would have bloody conflicts because there was a lot of power at stake. And so basically, the more power that's at stake, the more antagonistic the conflicts are going to be. For instance, this is why authoritarian regimes are usually the ones that go to war with each other. You know, when you have the Iran-Iraq war, where you essentially had a dictator versus a totalitarian religious theocracy, communists fighting other communists, or Nazis fighting communists, and stuff like that, in the past, it's usually these authoritarian regimes that will go to war with each other, whereas if you have two democracies, there's this concept called I think it's called democratic peace, and it's basically democracies generally don't go to war with each other. I mean, this is sort of a general principle that people have noticed. And so, just sort of concluding, Sargon made a few mistakes especially by not answering a few simple questions. Like, one specifically was, is nationality an identity? And yes, it is. Very easily, you could say it is an identity. And arguably, I think a better one than race, because it's a lot more flexible and sort of has more utility, I suppose. And also is a lot easier to define, I would say, too. And the other question that stood out was, is Lawrence Fishburne white? And of course, he's not white. Like, it's very obvious, and he doesn't identify as white either. And the thing is, you can easily reframe the question in that Lawrence Fishburne isn't the problem that the alt-right needs to solve. The problem is, where do the fuzzy edges solidify? I.e., like, where's the line between being white and non-white? Putting power in race, like this group is to be given power, then you have to define where those lines are, basically. And so that's the problem that the alt-right needs to solve. You know, I'm not saying that a consensus can't be reached, but that is something that they need to solve, essentially. One of Spencer's mistakes, I think, was being overly abstract. Maybe lofty is a better word. Not that Sargon wasn't at times, but Spencer really had this sort of, grand sort of vision kind of thing. He wasn't so much into practical solutions and specifics about creating an ethnostate. And realistically, real world practical solution the alt-right could do right now is essentially get a bunch of people together and buy a private island, one that's, you know, relatively free of other governments, and create your own ethnostate. It's a practical solution that could be had today, essentially. And that is something I tell sort of ANCAPs and ANCOMs a lot, is just, you know, get together and form your own sort of, you know, whatever state you're envision, essentially. It could be done, and I have no problem with the alt-right finding some island somewhere and creating, because honestly, the alt-right isn't going to get a majority power in the United States. It's just very unlikely to happen. Styx did a very good job being objective, I think. Especially, I mean, he even backed up Spencer once or twice when Spencer was correct on an issue. For instance, the communism one, like, Sargon was saying Russian and Chinese communism were the same when they're not, at least not ideologically. Styx was correct in pointing out that Sargon was conflating the results and not the ideology, because the ideology is definitely different. In fact, Russia and China nearly went to war with each other on several occasions, I think. One other thread I sort of wanted to pull on a little is, let's just say the United States breaks up into, this white ethnostate, black ethnostate, Asian ethnostate, etc., Latino ethnostate, all these other ethnostates and stuff like that. Would this sort of run directly counter to what the alt-right and these other far-left ideologies are trying to accomplish? Because if you have somebody who's mixed race who could, pass off as black or white or Latino or black or Asian or white or something along those lines, these mixed race people, and they can pass off as either, would they not be advantaged? Because essentially they would have more opportunities to pursue, their goals and sort of success in either state or, however. Because essentially merit will win out in a lot of cases. And so whoever, they'll have better opportunities because they can pass off as either. And so that's just sort of a question that, it might backfire, for instance. Because, again, like the way, like with the SJWs and affirmative action is, if you have affirmative action, people will look at, like a black person and say, did you get here just because you're black, or did you get here because you can actually hack it? And so it sort of essentially is the opposite intended effect and can sort of increase, racism and stuff like that. And the opposite of SJW goals. I don't know. Anyways, that's just sort of something to think about.